Tankers, welcome to H.E.A.T. We had a busy week recently, a lot of news. So let's start out with something you probably all know about, the Foch 155. It will be changed for the AMX 50 Foch. Yes, a barely playable Tier 10 French TD will be changed. It's about time. But here's the kicker. All players that have a Foch 155 in their garage at the time of the change will be able to keep it, as well as getting the new tank. So basically, you get two tier 10s for the price of one. Yes, that is why you've been seeing so many French TDs in random battles recently. So the main question here is, are there any other tanks that we know we should be grinding? Well, last week a new episode of the Developer Diaries was released, link in the description. And I pointed out two important rules from the developers. So number one, Tier 8 and 9 tanks are supposed to prepare you for the Tier 10 tank. So, if the gameplay isn't similar, it will be changed. And number two is, if the tank is toxic, it will be removed. If it is not, it will be left to those who already own it. Thus, from this, my biggest tip is to start grinding the FV215B, if you haven't got it already. And here's why. It has a rear turret position as opposed to the tier 8 and 9. This fits rule 1. And although it is a great tank in good hands, it can't be considered OP, and so is not toxic. So the chances are you will be able to keep it. And the other dead giveaway is that the screenshots of the Super Conqueror have been released. So it's probably very likely that it will be changed. So get on it, and right now there is an on-track for the FV on the North American server, so you got no excuse. The second piece of news is concerning the Grille 15. So it came to change a very toxic tank, the famous Waffenträger E100. Then was nerfed, and now it will be nerfed or gotten rid of very soon. This info is substantiated by the things that happened on the RU server last week. So, during the vote by the players for the next on track for the RU server, the Grille 15 was considerably ahead. Then, just before the decision time, the developers got rid of the option for the Grille. Now, this of course created an uproar, so later Wargaming released a statement that they did this to not increase the number of toxic tanks in random battles. To this, my personal answer is, if you thought that this tank was so toxic, why do you even give it as an option? But you can understand the developers. If they're planning on removing or nerfing the Grille 15, the more people that have it, the more backlash they're going to receive. So, if you haven't tried the Grille 15, you better get on it. In other news, with patch 9.20 coming soon, so are the Chinese TDs. They were originally designed by Wargaming only for the Asia server. This is because of two reasons. Number one, the Asia server really likes Chinese tanks, and who can blame them? And number two, since historically China bought rights to make Soviet tanks, the Chinese TDs have a very similar game style to the Soviet TDs, and look very similar as well. And initially, Wargaming didn't want to create an identical line, but did it only as a good gesture for the Asia server. It didn't take long for fans of the game on other servers to start shouting at Wargaming of the unfairness of the situation. So now every server is getting Chinese TDs. Thus the gameplay is predicted to be very similar to the Soviet line, although not identical, since the vehicles do have slightly different characteristics. And although I am all for this line, I suggest we don't get used to this. I don't want to see a line of Polish Schmids that is a ripoff of the T-34 through the T-54, and so on. To close off, there are several vehicles that are getting a buff on the super test. First of all, the Japanese Type 4 and Type 5 heavy tanks are getting buffed in maneuverability, but they are also getting a couple of relatively cold, weak spots at the front armor plates. Soviet meds, like the T-44, the T-54, and the Object 140, will get buffs to the turret armor. The T-54 will also get improved stats on both guns. This should make the Soviet med line more fun to play. I will probably do a separate video on the buffs in detail at a later date. So, if you liked this video and you want me to do more, please like and subscribe. And with that, I'll see you in the random.